In central Lithuania, in the Kaunas county, lies the small town of Žasliai. With a population of just around 650, this quiet town isn't the first place that would come to mind, as the location of one of the worst disasters of the country. But just south of the town, lies the Žasliai railway station, serving the town the Vilnius-Kaišiadorys railway line. And it is here, where on Good Friday, April 4, 1975, the worst train crash of the country would take place. At about 4:30 in the afternoon, a passenger diesel train left the Vilnius station. The train was crowded, most of the passengers were students, returning from campus, and going home to Kaunas for the weekend. Although the exact total number of passengers hasn't been determined, it was estimated to be in the hundreds. Meanwhile, a freight train was resting at the Žasliai station. It was traveling in the same direction, and had earlier made a stop at Pana station, close to Vilnius. This train consisted of 93 cars, loaded with gasoline fuel tanks. It was supposed to move to a sidetrack, in order to make way for the approaching passenger train. Which it did. But for some reason, it didn't manage to drive far enough, and placed the entire train on this sidetrack. This resulted in the very last car, to remain on the main track. The passenger train was now approaching the station. But little did the passengers know, what was waiting in front of them. Because the train didn't have a stop at the station, it was traveling at a speed of approximately 70 kilometers an hour. It was now at a collision course with the fuel tank car. The only person inside the train who saw it coming was the driver. But this happened when the train was just in front of the freight car. Tragedy was now inevitable. The train smashed the tank with a speed of 70 kilometers per hour. This caused the first 4 cars to derail. But it wasn't the derailment what would made this the nightmare that it was. The first car, the locomotive, hit the tank first and fell on its side. This gave the driver just enough time to escape. Because of the lock tearing open the tank, fuel was allowed to escape, and was sprayed on the second car, which ended on top of it. And the friction of the metal of the car with the tank, produced sparks that ignited the fuel, setting the second on fire. The third car hit the tank as well, and was stuck in the hole created by the first, causing it to be stuck in the center of the inferno. The fourth car came to a stop besides the tank. The fire was growing rapidly, and a massive explosion soon followed. All of the 4 cars would eventually be destroyed. As for the passengers, most of them didn't manage to escape. And most of them died of smoke inhalation, but some of them were burned alive. Local citizens alerted by the sound of the explosion, or the view of the smoke fire, rushed to the scene to look for survivors, and help escape trapped passengers and treat the wounded. Some eyewitnesses described the scene as hell on earth. The fire made the site very inaccessible for help, and many passengers couldn't be reached because of the still burning fire. Despite this, the volunteers heroically did everything to break the windows of the train and pull people out. Those who did escape, often suffered from severe burns. This was especially worsened by the synthetic clothing that many were wearing. The way this material burns, made the clothes melt on the skin, unable to pull it off. This caused the most unimaginable dilemma. When leaving it on, it could cause more of the terrible burns where the clothes weren't fully on fire yet. But pulling it off, caused the skin on the parts where the cloth was burned, to be pulled off as well. The people offering help started to wave down passing cars, to help getting the victims to the nearest hospitals. But just when they succeeded in having brought as much as possible of the wounded to get there, the hospitals were overwhelmed. The large number of people needing treatment, caused shortage in medical staff and resources, with torn-apart blankets being used as bandage. When firefighters from multiple departments arrived, their efforts had little effect, and assistance of military fire units was needed. And only after 15 hours, they managed to completely extinguish the whole site. Eventually, the number of casualties was reported to be 17, of which 15 died during the crash, and 2 at the hospital, and 39 injured. However, because of the Soviet ruling at that time, reporting about the disaster was suppressed. And the real numbers were speculated to be larger. And this later turned out to be the case. When Lithuania became independent in 1980, 3 more fatalities and 41 other injured became known, making the new total to be 20 and 80 respectively. Besides that, eyewitnesses say that it was not possible to determine the actual numbers of victims, and that it was likely higher. The speed at which the third car became completely engulfed in flames, and the immense heat, burned many of the victims beyond recognition. It needs to be mentioned that, amongst the victims, was a man from Žasliai, by the name of Arvydas Garnys. He was amongst the heroes who risked their lives, by going into the inferno in the effort to save lives. He managed to save 3 children from a burning car, and after that, even went back to search for more people. For his actions, he was awarded a medal for bravery, during the fire. On April 9 of that year, a commission of the Supreme Court established that, the foreman and dispatcher of the railroad were to be blamed for the accident, and were sentenced to respectively 3 and 13 years in prison. The reason on which the court based their decision, was the 2 men deciding to give clearance for the passenger train, believing it could overtake the freight train. However, it was later determined that their fatal decision was caused by a malfunction in the signaling system. This caused the system to indicate that the freight train was fully moved off the main track, and a red light that should have shown, didn't. Because of this, the dispatcher was released after serving 7 years. On August 31, 1991, a wooden monument was built near the site of the accident, remembering all the victims, who should never be forgotten.